The Trump Justice Department has demoted some of the most senior federal prosecutors who brought criminal charges against Trump allies and handled some of the most significant cases stemming from the Capitol insurrection. The demoted prosecutors include a group that sent to prison leaders of the far-right Proud Boys and Oath Keepers for spearheading the January 6th attack. Interim U.S. Attorney Ed Martin is transferring these veteran prosecutors to pursue misdemeanor offenses in D.C. Superior Court. Earlier in the week, Ed Martin described himself as Trump's lawyer. Reminder, the Justice Department is not the personal law firm of the president. Joining us now, former federal prosecutor and former Justice Department lawyer, Brendan Ballou. Welcome, Counselor.
Mr. Ballou, thank you for being here. I have talked to a number of people who have either been fired outright or who are currently placed on administrative leave. And one person I spoke with is the general counsel at an agency. They don't want to say which one because they'll be found out quite easily, who is career, non-political, administrative leave with the promise of being fired. And I said, what do you want people to know? What should people know? And they said that we are living through a coup. That, to me, is very chilling. Is that the feeling inside the Justice Department?
I mean, whether or not you would describe it as a coup, this is a fundamental change in what the Department of Justice is supposed to be. You know, after Watergate, the Department of Justice really reformed itself to become a much more nonpartisan institution to try to build up its own credibility. And I think we've seen in literally a matter of weeks that credibility get demolished. And I'll just say, the Department of Justice isn't like NASA that has rockets. It's not like the Army, that has soldiers. The only thing it has is its credibility. So once that's lost, it's going to be very hard to get back.
It's very clear who loses in all of this, and I want us to focus on who the winner is. You had a line from your testimony before the House Judiciary Subcommittee where you said the only people who benefit from these actions will be billionaire criminals, and for them, this will be a golden age. How quickly can that golden age come to be for those folks?
It seems like a matter of weeks. You look at what this department has been doing, things that maybe this administration doesn't want people to focus on, like ending investigations under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which prohibits foreign bribery, ending investigations under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which prohibits acting as an unregistered agent of a foreign power, shifting prosecutors from the Antitrust Division, which investigates price fixing and other crimes, to defend this administration's allegedly illegal proposals. So what we're seeing is a dismantling of much of the infrastructure that's used to go after rich criminals.
We were talking a little bit ago, Brendan, about the judicial part of this and how our courts are, a lot of folks are coming to think that this is the last beachhead. This is where it all comes, and this is going to be the bulwark. And as a prosecutor, having stand before judges and make that case, firsthand how important they are and how dispassionate they are. I mean, they're looking at the facts, they're looking at the law, and they're listening to the arguments and making judgments based on that. But that's not enough with the Elon Musk and Mike Lees of the world, who put out a tweet in which Musk says the only way to restore rule of the people in America is to impeach judges. No one is above the law, including judges. That is what it took to fix El Salvador. Same applies to America. And then this little ditty from Mike Lee: corrupt judges should be impeached and removed. Pass it on if you agree. Like, you're passing the hat on something. It should be noted that he filed articles of impeachment on Thursday against a U.S. district judge, a court judge, who ruled that the Trump administration could not suspend or cancel U.S. foreign aid. Yeah. That judge got materials in front of him that told him what he needed to do. And so you have Representative Andy Ogles filing articles of impeachment against him for making an impartial decision based on the facts and the law. Talk about the chilling effect that this has both on prosecutors and judges who still are trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, so two things. One is, you talked about the Ogles articles of impeachment. That is about Judge John Bates in the District of Columbia, who was appointed by George W. Bush, is an extremely experienced judge, a well-respected one. And the case that Representative Ogles was trying to impeach this guy for was one where Judge Bates said that it was improper for the government to take down public health information on HIV, sexually transmitted infections, contraception, in vitro fertilization. He was, by all appearances, following the facts and the law here. But this goes to the second point, which is I think what these folks are trying to do is prime their audience for this administration to ignore judicial orders. That's what they are trying to prepare people for.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Right
I mean, you have the FBI. I mean, the number 2 at the FBI is now a podcaster, and I ain't got nothing against podcasters, but Lord Jesus.
Shouldn't be the number 2 at the FBI.
I don't think so, and apparently neither do some FBI agents. NBC reporting says FBI agents expressed shock and dismay over the naming of right-wing podcaster number 2 post. On his podcast, former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino, who once called the FBI irredeemably corrupt, thanked the president for the appointment and suggested that he's prepared to step out of his role as a MAGA warrior. But even as he did so, he repeated the baseless charge that the Justice Department had been weaponized, a claim he has frequently brandished to criticize the agency he now will help lead.
Yeah. I mean, for one thing, the number 2 had a position in the FBI historically, I think always has been a career FBI agent. So this is a change from precedent. And I'll just say, this seems counterproductive to this administration's stated objectives. If you are serious about going after transnational crime or drug cartels or foreign influence, you would appoint an experienced agent or prosecutor. The fact that they have appointed a podcaster suggests that they are not particularly serious about these problems, that perhaps they don't even really care about whether these problems get solved.
Let's talk a little bit about the Capitol rioters and the work you did on the case and the fact that they are now out here, back on the streets. What does that mean for America's national security? What does it mean for Republicans in Congress who talk about how scared they are to stand up and do the right thing because they know that a right-wing mob has been unleashed?
Yeah, I think this was certainly the effect, probably the intention of these pardons, in that historically in America, we haven't had to deal with state-aligned militias since the Ku Klux Klan. That is now changing. We have approximately 1,600 people who have been pardoned for potentially violent actions at the Capitol in the name of this president, and they have now been placed functionally above the law. So, political violence is something that we haven't really had to experience in America for a generation or two. That's coming to an end.
Mr. Ballou, y'all wouldn't believe, but this is one of his first television appearances. Thank you so much for your insight. We hope you will come back, Brendan Ballou. Appreciate your time.
Doge and Elon Musk are still at it. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, is facing cuts that would essentially eliminate the agency. In court documents released Thursday, federal employees at the CFPB say the new Trump-appointed leadership plans to fire nearly all of its 1,700 employees, and that leaders have been instructed to essentially wind down the agency, which was created by Congress in 2011 to protect American consumers after the 2008 financial crisis. Elsewhere, nearly 800 employees have been cut at the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. Among those fired are weather forecasters at the National Weather Service, which sends alerts for storms and other natural disasters. One policy analyst at NOAA told the New York Times, quote, "The loss of talent at NOAA is going to set the agency back years and compromise the integrity of missions that directly support human health and safety, economic prosperity, and national security. This is not a move toward efficiency. It's a move toward putting Americans in danger every day," end quote. Indeed, it's hard to see how Doge's moves do anything to make the government more efficient, and even less to save it money. According to analysis by the Associated Press, 40% of the canceled government contracts touted by Musk are not expected to save the government any money. Elon Musk's sledgehammer approach to government has precedent in Silicon Valley. Mark Zuckerberg's internal motto at Facebook for several years was to, quote, "move fast and break things." But Musk is now arguing that there's precedent in politics as well. President Bill Clinton's Reinventing Government initiative. Last week, Musk posted on X, quote, "What Doge is doing is similar to Clinton-Gore Dem policies of the 1990s. The current Dem party has just gone so crazy far left that it isn't recognizable anymore," end quote. Now, Musk would be onto something if it were accurate. Would you be surprised if I told you it wasn't? The Clinton administration worked closely with Congress and with each federal agency and department to establish a bipartisan commission to oversee the Reinventing Government initiative. Between 1993 and 1998, that's a span of 5 years, the Clinton administration eliminated more than 400,000 federal jobs through a combination of buyouts, voluntary departures, and layoffs. But there's a huge difference between DOGE and Clinton's projects. For one, Clinton presented his plan to cut costs to Congress for approval, unlike the Trump administration, which has so far bypassed Congress. And Clinton's process of deciding what to cut was far slower and more deliberate. Elaine Kamarck, a senior policy advisor to then Vice President Al Gore, told Fortune that the Clinton Commission mantra was, quote, creating a government that works better and costs less, and that they, quote, took the time to understand the mission of the agency and understand if it was important or not important, end quote. Unlike Musk, who just admitted to accidentally cutting some pretty crucial disease prevention infrastructure.
We won't be perfect, but when we make a mistake, we'll fix it very quickly. So, for example, with USAID, one of the things we accidentally canceled very briefly was Ebola, Ebola prevention. I think we all want Ebola prevention. So we restored the Ebola prevention immediately, and there was no interruption.
It's just Ebola. What could go wrong? Elaine Kamarck joins me now. As I mentioned, she was a senior advisor to Vice President Al Gore during the Reinventing Government initiative. She's now a senior fellow and founding director at the Center for Effective Public Management at the Brookings Institution and a lecturer in public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Elaine, good to see you. Thank you for being with us today. I really wanted to talk to you after I read about you and the work that you did in the Clinton-Gore administration. It's got to be a little insulting to suggest that what DOGE is doing is a mirror of what you did.
Well, you know, it starts out with this sort of similar premise that you should take a good look at the government and see where there are efficiencies, et cetera. But the method they're using is just outrageous, okay? They are paying no attention to consequences, which is why, by the way, they're having to backtrack all the time. They cut people who were working on avian bird flu. That's, by the way, running up the cost of eggs. They cut people, as he just mentioned, working on Ebola in Africa. They are about to cut people from the Social Security Administration. And this is in the middle of the baby boom retiring. This is the biggest generation in American history, and they're cutting, not adding, and they're about to cut people from the IRS in the middle of tax season. Good luck getting your tax returns, your tax refunds, rather, sent back. You know that 69% of Americans get refunds, and they average about $2,800 a piece. People are going to be really mad when all those refunds slow down. So what's going on here is a little crazy. They are not paying any attention to the consequences of their actions. And we did it exactly the opposite way. We went into the agencies and tried to find what could be cut, how it could be cut, and what could be made better.
Right, because I haven't met anybody who has said, look, I'd like to pay lower taxes, I'd like to have more efficient government, but they need the government to work. You wrote in an article for Brookings this week in which you say DOGE has an enormous opportunity to improve the federal government, especially in the area of information technology. However, blanket firings and poorly planned demands for employees to justify their work week are undermining its credibility and authority. As court cases continue, expect more quiet reversals. No one wants to be blamed for rising egg prices or the next terrorist attack. This is an important point that you make here, that things can go wrong. The beauty of government when it works is that it's working as a background app and you don't actually know it's working. This is where the danger comes in if you don't look at the consequences.
That's exactly right. I mean, look at what the DOGE team is doing with these massive federal databases. This is really scaring people. This is even more serious than the cuts. These massive federal databases are responsible for getting your veterans benefits, your Social Security checks, for getting your Medicare, your doctor's visits paid for on Medicare. They're in there. We don't know who these people are. We have no guarantees that they've gone through the vetting process. process. And look, accidents can happen and will happen. And one of the accidents is there could be creating holes in these databases for hackers to come through, or Russians or Chinese or anybody who wishes us ill. Or they could be taking this data home in order to try and use it at some future point for some business that they're interested in. This is the databases, the across the board firings. It's just not how you go about doing this.
Well, I appreciate someone with actual experience in trying to do it, shedding some light on this. I suspect you and I are going to have more opportunities to talk. Elaine, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Elaine Kamarck is the founding director of the Center for Effective Public Management at the Brookings Institution. She's a lecturer in public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government.
New reporting suggests Elon Musk's Doge is getting closer to winding down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. According to CNBC, CFPB employees say that Musk and the agency's Trump-appointed leaders plan to fire nearly all 1,700 employees. This comes as members of the Senate Banking Committee grilled Trump's pick to lead the CFPB on Thursday. And during that very hearing, the agency dropped 4 lawsuits against firms accused of ripping off millions of Americans. The cases were originally filed under former director Rohit Chopra. And Rohit Chopra joins us now.
You up?
Hi, friends.
How's it going?
How's it going for you?
Did the president fire you?
He did. And here's what we've seen actually in the past few weeks. We've seen the CFPB hand out a series of corporate pardons to some of the biggest companies that were in the courtrooms where there was, in many cases, damning evidence that they had cheated consumers. Big mortgage companies, and including Capital One, which we accused of cheating people out of $2 billion in interest that they withheld. So we don't know how these pardons are being handed out.
You're calling them pardons, right? They're not calling them pardons. That's like your framework.
Well, they're going to a courtroom, pulling the case out and saying that it's never going to be filed again.
Right.
So it's
because they're dismissing it with prejudice.
They're dismissing it with prejudice. And by the way, it's not just cases that were filed under my time. It's also some cases filed under the first Trump CFPB, which is raising questions in the business community. What is the ways in which these are handed out? There doesn't seem to be any through line in terms of the type of law or type of conduct. And people on Wall Street are wondering, is there now this new process that they have to go through? And if they don't go through that process, are they going to be targeted? And I think there's some questions now about how is Wall Street reacting to this? And we're seeing, since the inauguration, the stock market is down, and more questions about how business is going to work if they're not clear sets of laws and rules.
Or maybe if you have, the appropriate number of zeros on that check, a whole lot of stuff can disappear, which is, part of what the problem is when you have corruption and grift being the order of the day, particularly in a space where that involves big corporate actors. And consumers. And so you have the reaction of Senator Elizabeth Warren from Thursday during the Senate Banking Committee's hearing with the CFPB director pick, Jonathan McCarran. Let's listen to what Elizabeth Warren had to say.
Nobody is helped by shutting down the agency except big banks, con men, and rip-off artists. Oh, and billionaires like Mr. Musk, who is trying to start a new X Money feature on his social media platform. By eliminating the CFPB, he would take the financial cop off the beat.
And that was my point. Enough zeros, right, in the right corners, a whole lot of bad things go away. A whole lot of
for them, not for consumers.
For them, not for consumers, exactly. And so where does this leave consumers now? Because I think consumers need to recognize a little outrageous indignation here, because they're about to get stomped on, and there's no one there, right, that's going to stand guard over that stomping and prevent it.
Oh, yeah, this is a totally defunding the police that look after consumers, that look after Wall Street, that look after big tech companies. And here's what's actually quite striking. There's an obsession by Elon Musk and the big tech companies about this agency. And I think here's why. We're seeing those companies lurch into wanting to control money, banking, and loans. Mark Zuckerberg wanted to create a currency a few years ago. Elon Musk wants to turn Twitter X into a whole super app where you can move money and more.
A bank.
And what we try to do is say, okay, if you are doing that, you can do it. You just have to follow the financial privacy laws, the laws that guard against errors and fraud. And I'll tell you, I think that triggered some of them. And I think that's part of the reason they're so damn obsessed with all this.
Is there, some folks have said that there's a conflict of interest because Elon Musk is directly involved in what is happening at CFPB, Doges, and the conflict of interest because of what you just noted. And it's just one of many conflicts of interest, frankly, that exists for Musk with this administration. Do you see it that way? Do you think this is a direct conflict of interest? And what is your biggest concern?
Yeah, well, we would prohibit our employees and others from even owning any stocks of any company related to our work. It's not just X and Twitter. There's also Tesla. A lot of people borrow a lot of money to purchase Teslas, and when things go wrong with their loan, they go to the CFPB. Every day we were getting back about $4 million on average into people's pockets, and right now it's zero. So I think it's not just the conflicts, it's that they're shutting down core functions that police the markets, and I just think this is baiting another financial meltdown like we saw in 2008.
The one benefit to you no longer being a government employee is that I can now ask you political questions. So many of the initiatives you took at CFPB were just wildly popular, right? I mean, across partisan lines, people don't want to pay junk fees. People don't want to be scammed when they're trying to pay for a loved one's funeral. Like, across the board, these are just basic consumer issues. And so I have been curious, what do you think Republicans' calculus is vis-a-vis the politics of all of this, right? Because once people have those protections in place, they grow to like them. They grow to like not having to pay additional fees every time they take money out of the ATM. Like, I don't know how you go back without facing some political consequence.
Well, they're calling me and saying they don't like it. I think they say, on one hand, President Trump campaigned on capping credit card interest rates. That's something I actually agree with, because they have gotten so high and they're churning people's monthly budgets. Yeah. But then, on the other hand, they're pardoning Capital One of the biggest credit card companies in America. So I do think you're starting to see a lot of unease about some of the actions that are taking, because who is this even favoring? And also big business is worried, too, about how do the rules work now?
Where, though? Who? And when do we start hearing from them?
I don't know if we ever will, because so many of them they almost whisper to you their concerns, because I think they fear retaliation as well.
Brave.
Well, but there is, to your point, Alicia, there's a lot here for consumers to recognize in this change. Folks may not necessarily know CFPB and that you were the head of it, but they do look around and see that there's less economic impact on them now. That even if I was not involved in that action, I get the benefit of whatever happened to Simone or whatever happened to Alicia in their financial transactions through their bank or some other institution. That piece of it is going to be interesting to see how it develops, because I've never understood in reconciling how I can pay 7% on my mortgage, but I have to pay 30% on my credit card. And so that's what consumers need to recognize now in this space, because that door is now wide open. Those interest rates, folks, trust me, are going to go up.
Yeah, and let me say that I don't want people to have to memorize all the acronyms of the agencies. I want there to be a clear plan on what are we doing to reduce monthly bills costs, rent, your utilities. So many of these costs are through the roof, and a lot of it is due to absolute kind of greedflation. and we have to have someone who will tack it to break up the companies that are really taking advantage of us. And so far, there has been no plan on doing any of that.
Ooh, very chilling. Rohit Chopra, thank you for being here. We appreciate you. In front of cameras, Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance made a choice to berate Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office yesterday. What was meant to be a negotiation over Ukraine's rare earth minerals quickly turned into a diplomatic disaster.
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to...
Count one.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
not
cards.
Playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
You're
playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing cards.
Serious.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III.
This moment is yet another reminder Trump is scolding the leader of a country that was invaded. Trump has never publicly scolded Vladimir Putin, the invader. He actually said in the meeting that, he can't criticize Vladimir Putin and then try to cut a deal. But he had no problem criticizing President Zelensky. This is just a week after Trump called Zelensky a dictator. Again, a false claim that mirrors Russian propaganda. Joining us now to discuss it all is former Republican Congresswoman Barbara Comstock of Virginia and Evelyn Farkas, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia. She's now the Executive Director of the McCain Institute.
Evelyn, I just can't even begin to level up the embarrassment, the sheer hubris and stupidity of what we witnessed. I'd like to finish a thought that President Zelensky tried to convey to little wonderkind J.D. Vance when they were talking about, when he was trying to help them understand, if we get this wrong, you will feel the influence of bad decisions. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about that.
During the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position.
It speaks to the ignorance of the man in the red tie that he didn't understand exactly how that conversation started. You're isolated, America. You're surrounded by two oceans, right? But even that, if you get this wrong, if you allow Russia to have control the way you're setting this up, you will feel the other side of that. Speak to that, if you could, just to help people in the White House understand how to do foreign policy.
Yeah. I mean, I was in Munich. The speech that really mattered was President Zelensky's speech, because he said the same thing. He said, Europe, if we get rolled over, are you ready? Same question applies to the United States, because if Europe's not ready, Vladimir Putin and President Xi, we have to understand, they are not separate. They're working together. They will come for us, because sphere of influence doesn't mean that you can't fend off the big power. The big power is always going to try to take you over if there's no international system to protect you, no rules, and no allies working with you, meaning the Europeans will have been, decimated by Putin. Now, we don't want to overemphasize how strong Putin is today, because he's very weak today, which is why we could have a deal if President Trump played this frankly better than he played it yesterday.
I think the whole thing just seems so myopic, right? The idea that the most important thing is having expressed gratitude, which, just for the record, let's play some sound of President Zelensky expressing his gratitude to this country.
I thank every American family. I thank President Biden and both parties. I'm very thankful to American people. Thanks you, your team, Congress. I'd like to thank America and our partners for the support. And I'm very grateful to all Americans. We deeply appreciate that Ukraine and America have stood side by side. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you for the invitation. So thank you very much.
So the guy seems pretty grateful. Maybe he wrote a thank you note afterwards.
He said thank you on the socials afterwards.
But the fact that Republicans came out and made it about that, made it about who was rude and who wasn't, not is America safer today than we were yesterday, kind of gives away the whole game.
Oh, of course it does. I mean, listen, what this showed was that J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are on Putin's side, period. And it really was a disgraceful performance at a time when we need leadership. And it's really amazing that you saw all these European countries, 30 countries immediately, speak out and come to the aid of Ukraine. And you have, I'm president of the Former Members Association. Former members, bipartisan, are very much in support of Ukraine. We gave our annual award to the people of Ukraine to express that support. We are working, to have, exchange programs with the former members of the parliament of Ukraine. So this is something where and the members of Congress, many of the silent ones, they have supported this. You had 300 votes in the House last year, bipartisan support in the Senate. So it is disgraceful, the performance we saw yesterday, a low in Congress. But now I think Europe understands that they are going to have to, it's going to be their finest moment, I think. They're going to come together. Donald Trump wants to be isolationist. He's fighting with Canada. He's fighting with Mexico. He doesn't like that. He said, who are the dumb people who made that deal with Canada and Mexico? He signed it. He doesn't know what he's done. He's asking, and J.D. Vance is sitting there thinking, you haven't thanked us. He didn't support the deal for Ukraine. He didn't vote for that. And Marco Rubio, who was slinking into that couch, he couldn't have been more uncomfortable. He didn't vote for the last package either. So the people who were sitting there, President Zelensky was being very polite to and thanking them. But he stood up for his country. He stood up for democracy. And all those European countries who are now standing up for him are the same people who were standing up for us after 9/11. And Donald Trump doesn't know any of that history.
Yeah. None of it. Look, some of my Republican friends are like, Zelensky needs to apologize. Some of my non-Republican friends are like, oh, I can't believe he went into the Oval Office like that. And that's the face I had, Evelyn. I was just like, what do you mean he needs to apologize? The Oval Office is a place where you have tough conversations, right? That is not Zelensky's first time in the Oval Office where he has had a terse exchange with an American president. There were many of those with President Biden. I do think, though, that is the first time he's been in the Oval Office where that exchange has happened in front of the cameras, where he was berated and belittled and humiliated as though he was the person that invaded Russia.
Which, of course, Trump's been lying about. Right. So he went into that meeting with Trump lying about who invaded who and lying about how much money the U.S. had given and who gave more when, by a factor of, 3? He's been saying 300, billion, in which, nothing of the sort. And, Donald Trump was fact-checked by President Macron and others just this week. So Trump has been lying, as he so frequently does from the Oval Office, and many of us have had to fact-check him in the past. I had an experience to do that myself, and he does not like that.
Evelyn, the minerals deal, maybe I don't know. I was just a comms person, okay? But I thought that the minerals deal...
person?
I wasn't a minerals person. I don't fashion myself as an economist like the chairman here. I was just a comms person, and my comms person understanding of what is going on here is that the minerals deal was literally Ukraine and the United States basically signing an MOU so that American companies can mine these minerals in their country. I would know where the minerals are, I'm told.
Some of them
are in territory that's currently controlled by Russia. It does nothing for Ukraine. So it feels to me like a little bit of an extortion. But you tell me.
Well, so I think where it went off the rails was the Trump administration said, we're going to make this deal, and this deal should give you security because we will now have a stake in the future of Ukraine. The problem is, from Zelensky's perspective, it doesn't give him a security guarantee because tomorrow you sign the deal. Tomorrow, no troops are going in automatically. There's no agreement on the security part. So there's a lot of political risk for Zelensky. Remember, he's a democratically elected leader. There's a lot of risk for him in saying, okay, I'm going to sign this deal without even the administration, the U.S. government, giving him something of a security agreement or even a public promise that they're going to continue to negotiate it. But I think the Trump administration was also really stubborn about not wanting to go further than this minerals deal. And again, the public component of this is astonishing. I mean, it was 2-on-1. You know, those people in the side seats, they're not supposed to speak
the side
until
seats
spoken to. It's two principles, president and president. If my president, and I've been in a lot of these meetings, I've been up to the level of the vice president with Foreign Minister Lavrov. If Vice President Biden had wanted me to say something, he would say, Evelyn, blah, 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 ask me something. I would answer, and then I would go back to spectator mode. You don't bully and, team up. And it's the two principles. So there's a lot of protocol that went wrong there, too, as you know.
Evelyn, let's broaden this out a little bit more because, okay, we see in play the idiocracy, which is this administration when it comes to foreign policy, among other things. This now shifts, in my view, the focus to Europe. And I've been asking this question for the past year and getting some really crazy looks, but now I think people understand why the question is relevant. Who among our European allies is ready to step up and take control of this alliance, recognizing that as of yesterday, effectively, the U.S. has sided itself with Russia and the darker forces on this planet that don't stand for the light of liberty, but stand for the darkness of authoritarianism and control of people's lives? Who in Europe do you see, or which partner, pair of leaders in Europe are prepared to step forward into this space?
I'd say that there are three candidates. And I think the Europeans have to decide. I can't decide that for them. But obviously, President Macron, he's been very good about dealing diplomatically with President Trump. He also clearly is interested in taking the lead. And he doesn't have his future in politics is uncertain, so he could potentially take the lead in some other way. Or maybe he will come to gain more power because of what's happening.